Deputy Premier Andrew Stoner, Brendan Grills, my parliamentary colleagues from near and far, our President Christine Ferguson, State Presidents, delegates and ladies and gentlemen. Well, welcome to our Federal Council meeting, hopefully the last for a long, long time in opposition. We've had a lot to be proud of in our party over the last 100 years, but in particular, the last 4 or 5 years have seen a high watermark in our party's success at state and hopefully soon also a federal level. And can I particularly at the beginning congratulate Brendan Grills and the West Australians for reaching another peak in their achievements in that state at the last state election. But I'd like to begin especially by recognising 4 of our colleagues who have indicated that they will not be seeking re-election at the upcoming election. So this will be their last Federal Council meeting as parliamentarians. Paul Neville and John Forrest are 2 long-serving colleagues who have become great champions of regional Australia. They've been custodians of the values of our party. They've been a constant conscience of our regional obligations. They're passionate and they're determined, and they've been the face of the Nationals in their area for about 20 years. That's been a remarkable contribution. Tony Crook has served only 1 term and has decided not to contest the next election. If he had decided to run, I have no doubt he would have been successful. Tony was the first West Australian National to be elected to the Federal Parliament in a very long time, and no one can take that honour from him. We regret the fact that we will not have the opportunity to enjoy his friendship in our parliamentary room over the years ahead, because I'm sure that had he continued, he would have played a much greater role in the Federal Parliamentary Party. And then, of course, Senator Ron Boswell. He's the father of our room and the father of the Senate. By the time his term ends, he will have become the 5th longest serving senator in the history of our country. Ron has been a wonderful champion for regional communities. So many groups see him as their personal spokesman in the Parliament. He's been a wonderful ambassador for the Nationals, and the Parliament certainly will never be the same without him. Could you join me in congratulating and thanking these wonderful colleagues for their service over the years? Now, I want to welcome also a strong team of candidates who are ready to take their places and contest the poll in just over 100 days. Keith Pitt in Hinkler, Andrew Broad in Mallee, Chubb Witham in O'Connor, and Matt Canavan in the Senate. They join a dozen or so capable candidates who will be taking on the task of winning seats from Labor and Independents to ensure that we not only maintain our numbers in the Parliament, but that we play an ever-increasing role in ensuring that there's a change of government and a strong regional representation in the new Parliament. And can I also welcome Barry O'Sullivan, Senator-elect, who will take a place in the Senate when Barnaby Joyce chooses to retire and to make the tilt to join the House where the Parliament and the government is made, the lower house, where I'm sure he will continue to make a wonderful contribution on behalf of regional Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, what our country needs right now more than ever is a good dose of optimism and confidence. A shot of optimism so that business will grow and employ their fellow Australians. Confidence for families to buy a home or even just buy the goods associated with modern life. Optimism to go about everyday life without the constant threat that government is just lurking around the corner, waiting to have another whack at you if you dare to try and get ahead. It's an optimism that's simply been lacking in regional communities right now. I see it, you all see it, just all of the time. The lack of confidence that Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan and Labor inspire in the community is nation-destroying. After all, our Prime Minister's negotiating triumphs include giving Telstra $11 billion to stop using its network, offering to take 5 asylum seekers from Malaysia for every one person sent by us to them, personally and secretly negotiating a mining tax that this year raised just 10% of what was expected, even though the 100% of what was expected has already been spent to share the proceeds of the boom, which this government destroyed before it even began. Paying $34 million to save workers' jobs at Ford, only to have them announce a shutdown. A poker machine policy that will cost country clubs and pubs dearly, but will have zero impact on problem gambling. And the near destruction of Australia's northern beef industry. It's time for the Prime Minister and Labor to undertake a long refresher course on the opposition benches. My friends, the carbon tax ratchets up 1 month from today. Paradoxically, it's an added impost Australian businesses and families will pay while the carbon price in Europe continues to plummet, now 5 times lower than our own. If Labor and Greens and their Green mates and the independent props get back in on September the 14th, the carbon tax will go up again next year. And from next year it will also apply to road transport. There will be a distance-based tax hit on fuel, which means regional families and businesses lose the most. On top of the carbon tax increases, everything we truck into regional towns will be more expensive and everything we truck out will be less competitive. Is it any wonder that voters are looking forward to September the 14th like young children look forward to December the 25th? I give you this promise: there will be no carbon tax under a Liberal National Coalition government. You can also count on the mining tax being abolished so we can turn back on the investment tap and achieve more jobs in the regions. After more than 40,000 illegal arrivals on Labor's watch, you can also be assured that we'll stop the boats and the floodgates will be closed on the people smugglers. Unashamedly, the Nationals have a plan to build a stronger economy by playing to our strengths in the regions. We're starting from a long way behind. The Gillard government has ensured that the nation's finances are in chaos, that our global competitiveness is on the slide. Getting our country back on track is not just about cutting Labor's waste. It's a start, an important start, but we have to do more. We have to back the regions economically and socially. Our miners can still produce the natural resources the world needs. Our farmers can still produce food for an ever hungrier world. Our manufacturers can still make cutting-edge products. Our electricity generators can still create low-cost power to fuel those industries. Our tourism operators can still create a domestic and international destination of choice. Our small businesses are still the engine room of the economy, our biggest employers. What they desperately need is a federal government that will get out of their way, that will slash the red and the green tape and let them get on with the job of making jobs for others and to get on with their lives. Now, last week we witnessed the news of 1,200 jobs to be lost at Ford in Victoria come 2016. And there have been so many other announcements like that over recent years. But the 1 and 2 jobs lost every day in every town do not make the evening news. The small businesses that could not carry on, those job losses are just as tragic and just as tragic for the families and the communities involved. Manufacturing jobs in Australia have been lost at the rate of 1 every 20 minutes since Labor came to office. So much for Labor being the champion of the workers. So much for budgets that were about jobs, jobs, jobs. Since Labor's been in office, 1 job has been lost in manufacturing every 20 minutes. Now, our plan is a recipe for more jobs and for better jobs and for greater job security. The Nationals will put regional Australia at the heart of the national economic recovery. That is not only good for the regions, it's good for the nation. While Labor has been fighting over 1 job, the Prime Minister's, we have committed to creating 1 million new jobs in our first 5 years and 2 million over a decade. Our plan is based on the priorities of a stronger and more prosperous economy that delivers new jobs, higher wages and better services for families. And we've done it before. The last coalition government created 2.4 million jobs and delivered a 21% increase in real wages and saw Australian families almost triple their net household wealth. The 16 of us who are ministers in the Howard, Fisher, Anderson, Vale governments know only too well the discipline that's required to create real benefits for real families. Our plan to create 1 million new jobs starts with scrapping the carbon tax, which is a major cost on every Australian business and every family, and axing the mining tax, which acts against investment and growth. We'll also cut red tape by $1 billion each year and create a one-stop shop for environmental approvals to cut through the green tape, which is strangling so much investment, development and confidence. We can also put downward pressure on the Aussie dollar by not borrowing so much money. Right now, the Labor government is out there borrowing $100 million each and every day. That madness simply has to stop. The government's gross debt, the debt which we'll have to pay back, will be close to $300 billion by election day and is hurtling towards $370 billion over the forward estimates. But Labor doesn't seem to think that debt even matters. They seem to think that you can reduce debt by borrowing more. But it is real money. It is real money and has to be paid back in real money. If you were to convert $370 billion into $5 notes and lay them end to end, they would reach all the way from the Earth to the Moon 25 times. 25 times. If you wrap them around planet Earth, they'd go around 240 times. Such is the enormity of the task that the next coalition government will face to pay back this debt, that we will need to deliver bigger surpluses than the Howard government ever achieved and do it 18 years in a row. 18 years in a row without any slipping or sliding. That's about $20 billion a year in surpluses for almost 20 years before we can just get back to breaking even. Now, the interest that's going to be paid on all of that money will be a first call on our budget. It's money that otherwise could have funded a national disability insurance scheme, the best education system in the world, or the roads that we need for our cities and our communities. Getting Australia back into the black isn't, though, just about budget cuts. Cuts alone are not the tonic for Labor's legacy of debt. We'll need to make also the right investments for growth and prosperity, because building a stronger economy also boosts government revenue and reduces deficits. And regional Australia is in the driver's seat, and I say that for very good reasons. By 2050, Australia's population will balloon to 40 million mouths to be fed. At the same time, the world's population will explode to over 9 billion. And half of those people will live in the Asia-Pacific region, literally our northern doorstep. The globe is entering an era of world food shortage and shrinking farm production as farmland is eaten up by urban sprawl and water diverted to quench the thirsts of thirsty cities. Australia must ensure we can meet our future domestic needs, but also capitalise on growing world food needs. Australia is in a prime position, but are we really geared to deliver? At the moment, it seems to be almost taken for granted by some that we will just organically benefit from our geography. But everyone in regional Australia knows you will reap only what you sow. We want to establish a northern food bowl, treble mineral exports, see major energy developments, a bigger high-value tourism industry, and world centres of excellence for tropical medicine and health research. These go hand in hand with major education and defence facilities and a larger northern population. Building dams and water storages to protect us from droughts and floods can make regional Australia more productive. You know, we haven't built a dam in Australia for 20 years. In 1990, Australian dams could store more than 4 years' supply of our water needs. Today, they can just store over 3 years of supply. And if we don't build any new dams, by 2050, they'll only be able to store just over 2 years' supply. Australia currently uses 6% of our available water resources, compared to a world average of 9%. If we increased our use equal to the world average, about what's happening in North America, Australia could double its food production to feed more than 100 million people. The CSIRO has identified 5 to 17 million hectares of arable land in our north, where over 60% of our rain falls. Clearly, not all this land can be developed, but the opportunities are waiting to be realised. We have done some of the work, but we need to increase the pace so we don't make the poor decisions state Labor governments made in our last drought. Because of those decisions, water prices have gone up 64% since 2007, much of that the cost of infrastructure that's now been mothballed. As the mining boom has shown, growth and development in regional parts of Australia feeds back into jobs and opportunity in our major capital cities. Investing in the growth and prosperity of inland Australia is in everyone's best interests. But it's a great shame that foreign interests seem to value our land and its food-producing capacity and the businesses associated with driving growth in agriculture far more than Australians. Now, I and the Nationals generally have been saying quite a bit about foreign investment in Australia. Now, when the West Australian government announced a preferred proponent from China to bring the iconic Ord River and East Kimberley expansion project to fruition, we didn't object. These major projects are for the long haul and are what is needed in the region, and they can act as a catalyst for opening up and developing more of northern Australia for agriculture. That said, there are other Australian purchases that are somewhat more controversial. We are yet to have an explanation as to how the sale of Australia's most valuable farm, Cubby Station, along with its significant water rights, was in the national interest. Under the current rules, foreigners who seek to buy a suburban home in Australia have to seek approval through the FIRB, Foreign Investment Review Board processes, and they will find it very difficult. But Wayne Swan seems to have no issue with the biggest irrigation farm in the country being bought by overseas interests. The Foreign Investment Review Board has never said no to a foreign takeover of Australian farmland or Australian agribusiness. But now it faces another crucial test. The government must deal with the proposed takeover of Australia's largest agribusiness, GrainCorp, by Archer Daniels Midland ADM, a US giant that is the second largest grain business in the world. If this bid is successful, it would mean that every grain export facility in Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, and all but half of one in Victoria would be foreign-owned. It would hand ADM 280 storage sites in the eastern states with capacity for 21 million tonnes, 19 grain trains, 3 container loading facilities and vital stocks information. It is fair to say that the owner of these vital assets have the ability to decide whether Eastern Australia has a grain industry or not. ADM is not offering any new investments or any new commitments to Australia, just new owners at an above market price. What is in this deal for Australia? There's no doubt that grain storage handling charges will rise for farmers to pay for the purchase and the profits to be transferred to new American owners. Now, this purchase, along with the dominant buyouts of Australia's sugar industry, meatworks, dairy industry, grain marketing, oilseed crushers, food processing, the wine industry, mostly over the last 4 years, raises serious questions about the future decision-making in our agricultural industries. You know, we dream to become the food bowl of Asia, but increasingly, the decisions about whether or not that can ever happen will be made in boardrooms in America, Europe, Asia, and even New Zealand. All of this prompted GrainCorp Chairman Don Taylor to note in the Financial Review last month, and I quote, "Australia has lost the chance to create a global agricultural champion, raided by foreign companies consuming everything from sugar refineries to grain storage and export infrastructure." He said, "I think this government has been the most anti-agricultural government that I can remember in my lifetime." And Don's 62. I agree. And I add that of all of Labor's government failures, its disregard for agriculture and our food industries, which has gone largely unreported, may well have the most enduring consequences for our nation. Now, we support genuine foreign investment that strengthens our economy, that promotes growth and fosters confidence. But investments must not be contrary to our national interest. The Coalition has developed a new regime to scrutinise foreign takeover bids. We'll implement a national register of foreign ownership of farmland and agribusiness. We'll require the Foreign Investment Review Board to review any proposed foreign acquisition of agricultural land valued above $15 million. The FIRB will also be required to review any proposed foreign acquisition of an agribusiness where the investment represents 15% or more in an agribusiness valued at $224 million or exceeds $53 million, whichever is smaller. We will broaden the FIRB membership, including people with business and agricultural interests. But it's also time to broaden the national debate on this issue. Not just question foreign investors who see the value and the opportunities in agricultural assets, but also ask why Australian investors do not. As a government, we are prepared to back innovative proposals to encourage and support investment in our agricultural industries and help seed projects that benefit our industry or enable it to be internationally competitive. Our farmers are renowned the world over for their innovation, for their high quality and sustainable production, and their green credentials. If Australians lack the vision to see the potential of our food-producing industries in a world crying out for more food, we will not be able to resist foreign investors who appreciate their real value. Australians are also entitled to make informed choices about the food that they buy, including where it comes from. There are many complaints about misleading country of origin labelling. Now, while the problem is due in part to a failure to promote the meaning of the existing labels and a failure to police existing laws, we need to improve labelling to inform consumers where produce is grown and processed. On election to government, the Nationals will work with the industry to develop a labelling system that clearly gives consumers the information they need to choose Australian. Now, we see this summary that Don Taylor made of the government echo through other farm industries too. a crisis meeting in Richmond a couple of weeks ago, starkly illustrated that 2 years on, the cattle industry is still reeling from a government that overreacted to a television program. Not surprisingly, Indonesia's reaction to Labor's blanket ban on live exports was to fast-track its aspiration of self-sufficiency and reduce Australia's quota for live cattle. And I might add, boxed meat exports as well. In all, some 13,000 direct Australian jobs depend on this sector. But it's also important to note that this is a decision that had particular impact on Indigenous communities. There are 82 Indigenous cattle properties, which directly support 700 Indigenous jobs. Indirectly, a further 17,000 people in station communities. The message is clear. Our live export markets have been burned by an inept Australian government. Rebuilding that relationship, rebuilding that industry will be a key focus for the Coalition. But there are some lessons also that need to be learned. The northern cattle industry has become too dependent on live exports, and I welcome the proposal to build abattoirs in Northern Australia, and we stand ready to help however we can. There are already, however, 14 abattoirs that have closed over the years between Townsville and Perth. There will need to be a different business plan if we are to try again. We fervently believe in the economic potential of regional Australia and that it is unlimited if it is properly facilitated and properly supported. We don't apologise for wanting to create greater economic opportunities for that part of the country. It's always been the case that when our regions are strong, so is our nation. Unless we can bring business and people to regional cities and develop new commercial hubs, the 40 million people Australia is expected to have by 2050 will grind our cities into perpetual gridlock. It's a little-known fact that Australia's population is already one of the most densely concentrated in the OECD, almost double the OECD average. Just under 90% of our population is crammed into 3% of our land mass, namely Sydney and Newcastle, Melbourne, Brisbane, Queensland South East, Adelaide and Perth. And that's simply not a sustainable population. The Coalition's plan for fast broadband and an affordable NBN is a key policy to help regional Australia grow. Our plan will result in every Australian household, including every country household, having access to high-speed broadband at a minimum speed of 20 megabits per second by 2016. We will deliver it faster and cheaper than Labor's long-delayed and crisis-riddled scheme, ensuring that every Australian household and business has access to minimum standard high-speed broadband as soon as possible will deliver increases to productivity and improved living standards. Labor's NBN will leave some communities waiting until next decade to see any improvements to their broadband services, creating a deep and lasting digital divide. Our plan places a priority on delivering upgrades for those communities that currently have poor broadband services, not duplicating services in areas that already have optic fibre cables. For some regional communities, our plan will use fibre to the node technology to deliver fixed-line broadband where the NBN will only ever offer wireless services. Within 90 days of election, we will require the Department of Broadband to present the Parliament with a ranking of broadband services in Australia, so we can begin the process of rolling out fast broadband to the communities that need it most. Poor broadband services are a key challenge to regional communities, but we will not forget that the most pressing communications issue in much of regional Australia is still poor mobile phone coverage. 2 successive regional telecommunications reviews have found that mobile phone coverage is the most talked about communications issue in regional Australia. But Labor hasn't invested a single dollar in establishing more mobile network stations since it came to office. It cancelled the program that the previous government had underway and has not invested a single dollar of its own. The Howard government had invested $145 million to improve mobile phone coverage. And of course, the Nationals helped deliver the $2 billion communications fund, which should have been used to deliver better telecommunication services to regions in perpetuity. Instead, Labor raided the fund to help pay for its first version of an NBN. And as a result, regional Australians have missed out on hundreds of millions of dollars in telecommunications upgrades. The Coalition has committed to actively seek opportunities to leverage off the NBN wireless rollout to improve mobile phone coverage. And we're also working to restore a substantial mobile phone black spots program to fill many of the mobile telephony gaps. So many opportunities have been lost by our city-centric government over the past 5 years. You may or may not be surprised to know that under the Rudd and Gillard eras, with one brief exception, every cabinet minister lives in a capital city. Every single Rudd and Gillard government cabinet minister lives in the capital city, with one brief exception. For the record, 6 of my colleagues in the shadow cabinet proudly call regional Australia home. The point is that if we're elected, we'll have a government with a strong regional focus, and we'll ensure that the regions share in our nation's growth and prosperity. We will ensure that there are real opportunities delivered to those who live outside the capital cities. Making the economy strong is the place to start. We have a plan to get government spending under control and ensure that spending is focused on projects that benefit the nation. The so-called independents and Greens are now tied to their record in government with Labor. They've been complicit in the waste, the mismanagement and the scandals. The independent experiment has failed. The only way regional people can be assured of getting rid of the government that Julia Gillard leads is to vote for the Nationals and our Liberal colleagues. The only way regional people can be sure of having a strong, concerted regional voice as part of the next government is to vote for the Nationals. Ladies and gentlemen, I started today talking about confidence. I have no doubt that in Australia, freed from Labor, the Greens and the Independents, can achieve anything. I'm positive about the future. The key role regional Australia must play in resuscitating our economy, both economically and socially. Now it's the time for the nation to turn back to the regions and invest in their growth and to reap the rewards and the opportunities that can be delivered through better living standards for all Australians. The Nationals will ensure that regional Australia gets its fair share so that the regions can grow and achieve their full potential and to get Australia back on track. Join me in this task, ladies and gentlemen, over the next 100 days as we work to the change for a new government.